Did you know I still did horror reactions? I have another channel for it. A lot of people's been asking in the comments, so I figured I'd mention it up front before people started skipping. Anyway, SCP-682, the hard-to-kill reptile, or the Tarrasque, is one of the most powerful SCPs in the universe. The Gate Guardian is also regarded as one of the most powerful entities in the SCP universe, and it's a 001 proposal versus 682, which is not one of the 001s. They are both Keter class, naturally. They both are capable of doing some crazy stuff, and SCP Illustrated did a story about them versus one another. So we're gonna react to it today, guys. Make sure to subscribe to SCP Illustrated and me if you like reaction videos, and let's get into this one.
The doors to the shipping container were pulled open by the attending D-Class, and an enraged creature came bounding out.
Oh god, a D-Class.
It instantly grabbed one of the men in its mouth and cleaved him in two, swallowing the upper half. Several armed men came forward and unleashed a barrage of heavy gunfire into the creature from behind. Bloody jaws turned towards the armed men, ready to slaughter them where they stood. But for now, the creature had more important things to do.
So
it turned and quickly put the men behind it, sprinting away to freedom. He heard a voice in his head. It was commanding him to leave. The strangeness of the situation struck him almost immediately, and so did something else.
Uh-oh.
The ground split in two as the reptile was struck. One of the most powerful and mightiest entities the Foundation had ever encountered unleashed its fury on 682. Another blow descended on 682 before he had even hit the ground. 682 took a deep breath of scorched earth and his own flesh as he rolled onto his back. His entire being was charred and red raw. He pulled himself out of the crater to see an angelic being standing over him.
The snake slithers back to the garden.
Ooh.
He spat blood and burnt meat onto the ground.
You corrupted my lord's vision.
I simply suggested they eat the fruit.
After another blinding flash of light, 682 was hurtling across the landscape once again, this time with a massive gash in his abdomen. His entrails followed, not too far behind him. He groaned in his crater and began consuming the earth around him. Lost muscle and flesh began to regrow, armored plating began to cover his extremities, and he began to grow. He could feel his bones creaking and snapping, adjusting to his new form.
You command me to die after the curse your lord laid upon me?
682 stood tall and stared down the angel. Everything about his new form was catered towards bringing death to this being.
Good lord.
Uriel brought his sword up and stared back, waiting for the reptile's first move. With a monumental roar, 682 bounded towards Uriel. Just as 682 was upon him, Uriel swung his sword around and brought it swiftly into the side of 682's head. The receiving side of 682's skull shattered, sending a hailstorm of blood and bone fragments to the ground.
Dude, this is
crazy. The reptile quickly recovered and used the impact's momentum to swing his tail around and slam it into Uriel's side, the spikes going deep. Uriel brought the sword swinging back, separating 682 from his tail in a flash. He followed up with a hard kick to the beast, sending it crashing backwards. Uriel glanced down at his wounds and gave 682 an acknowledging nod. The reptile roared and struck the ground, causing it to bubble and split between their feet. The faults ran deep and lava began to bubble up from between the cracks. 682 lowered himself to the floor, never taking his eyes off Uriel, and began absorbing the fire into his form. Uriel took a step back into a defensive position and readied himself for the next strike. The beast began to convulse before expelling a mixture of magma and acid.
Oh my
Uriel
god.
brought his sword back and wrapped his many wings around his form. The mixture settled on them, but did not penetrate. 682 moved in to press his advantage as the angel's wings unfurled and showered the beast in its own cocktail of searing hot acid.
Dude.
682 fell backwards, screaming in agony as his eyes melted in their sockets. Uriel brought the flaming sword crashing down on 682, splitting him from head to chest. A final cut was delivered and the beast's lower limbs were removed, leaving it to crawl on the floor. 682 didn't even try to get up.
Wow.
Exactly where a snake should be, on its belly.
So kill me.
My lord has commanded you to suffer.
To suffer for all eternity. Wow.
Uriel raised his sword once more, holding the hilt high with the blade low, and let gravity pull it down into the beast's hide. 682 felt a brief sensation of scorching heat and agony before being reduced to a severed head. He could feel his armoured plating disappearing into his body, his remaining mass being redistributed to replace what was lost. A massive hand grabbed him before tossing him out of the garden. He coughed and wheezed as the impact sent dust and rocks into his airways. He heard the words remove in his head, and as his eyes returned, he saw several blurred humanoid figures in orange jumpsuits approaching him on the horizon.
There's the D-Class. Wow, man. Like, the Gate Guardian
And that concludes
just
this crossing.
destroyed him, man. That's who I was betting on in general. Like, 682 is not a 001, right? It's not to say that 001s are the be-all, end-all, but they are strong. Like, they're the strongest in the SCP universe for sure. 682 is unkillable, but that doesn't mean he's the be-all, end-all of powerhouses, right? All of the mentions about the garden and creation and the masters, that's some weird stuff, heaven and hell type, you know. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I want your analysis. I don't want to be too deep into this thinking it, but honestly, I think the Gate Guardian was basically talking about his master like God, and basically the reptile, or 682, kind of referring to his master as maybe Satan. I don't know. It's hard to know exactly where it came from, but this canon is very, very interesting. Y'all let me know, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to SCP Illustrated, by the way. Subscribe to me if you like reaction videos. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.